sunset shot out there.
Yeah, it's beautiful out.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming out tonight to this forum for our Stratham, our local Stratham candidates for the upcoming election. It's so great to see all these smiling faces out there. We really appreciate you guys engaging with this process. It's important, and probably this year more than ever. I mean, I feel like we said that last year, but it's also so important this year more than ever. So we are going to start out this evening with some introductions. We're planning on doing kind of a forum format here this evening. We'll have the candidates do introductions, and as if on cue, our third candidate is now here. So we'll go ahead and start with Alison. Alison Knab is one of our candidates for state rep, for Stratham state rep. Zoe Manos is our second candidate for Stratham state rep. We do have 2 seats here representing Stratham, so we will have these 2 fine ladies representing us in Concord for this next 2 years. So we're really looking forward to that, and we appreciate them stepping up to do that. And Alexis Simpson is our state representative in the Floterial district, which covers Stratham, Exeter, Newfields, and Newmarket. And we'll hear from all of them here tonight, and there'll be some time for questions and answers. So if you do have questions, feel free to hold on to those until they've all done their introductions, and then we'll move straight to those questions. So we'll go ahead and start off with Alison Knab.
I should have sat in the middle seats.
Yeah.
Although we've sandwiched the Z in between. I am Alison Knab. I am running for state representative. I appreciate everyone being here tonight, and I really appreciate the Stratham Dems for putting this together. I have lived in Stratham for 14 years. I live here with my husband Brian, who's a radiation oncologist at the Elliott in Manchester, and my 2 daughters, Clara and Evelyn, who are students at Cooperative Middle School and Exeter High School, and my dog Wally, must be mentioned. I'm one of those people who has cocktail napkins that say, "Stop me before I volunteer again." And so when I moved to Stratham 14 years ago, one of the first things I did was fill out the form to volunteer with a board or a commission. And I ended up on the Conservation Commission, been on there for 14 years. I was the chair for several years. I was the secretary for several years. And as a result of that, ended up serving on a lot of other ad hoc committees and different committees in town. A few years ago, I was approached by someone on the select board who was stepping down for health reasons about potentially running for the select board. And at the time, I thought, I'm interested, but maybe I'm a little too busy. Maybe my girls are a little bit too young. But I also had that feeling that had been nagging in my brain for years of there needs to be more representation on the select board. The select board members have been wonderful for 300 years, but they have almost exclusively been men. Many of them retired men. I'm the second woman to serve on the Stratham Select Board, and so I did decide to throw my name in the hat. I've now served for a little over 4 years on the board, and I thought it was important that things like what the basketball program looks like, what the teen librarian does, what the children's librarian does, people knew someone on the select board knew what that looked like. So I had sort of a similar reaction when I was asked about running for the State House. Maybe I'm too busy, maybe my kids are still too young. But I also had the same feeling that representation matters, and it matters more now than ever in the State House. I've watched for the last several years as our public education system has come under attack, where you have people making decisions who have never had children in the public school system, where you have people attacking teachers. I know what it's like to have your children do safety drills in the school. I know what it's like to get a call from your child saying, "Mom, I'm safe, I'm a mile from school," because we ran because we thought there was a shooter. I know what it's like to get emails from teachers that you can tell they spend an hour working on because they are telling you that they're learning about the civil rights movement, and they feel like they might get reported for how they're teaching about the civil rights movement. As a woman, I feel like it's important, very important, to have a representation in the State House now, where women's rights are under attack and their reproductive freedom is under attack. And as a select board member, I've watched for the last couple of years as more and more legislation has come down the pipe that seems to be trying to take away local control. So the party of small government is constantly telling local governments what to do, and local planning boards, local select boards, and city councils. So these are all things that I hope to work on when I get to Concord, and that I'm interested in being a representative for. So I hope you all will support me and tell your friends about us. I'm incredibly thrilled to be running with 3 great women. I'm sorry Deborah couldn't be here tonight, but Zoe and Alexis, it makes me very proud to be a part of this group, and I will turn it to Zoe, or do you want to say anything
Yeah.
between us? Yes.
Take it away,
Okay.
Zoe.
Great. So my name is Zoe Manos. I've lived in Stratham since 1999. I'm an attorney, and I've practiced neglect and abuse law in Portsmouth and Lawrence and Haverhill. And I did that for about 22 years. And then while I was practicing law, my mom became sick, and she developed dementia and Parkinson's. So that was in 2014, and I moved in with her to care for her because she was beginning to fail and gradually couldn't care for herself. So I did that for about 8 years, and she passed away this past May. But we had a really, really intimate and really a caring relationship with each other and a really strong journey together. And as part of that, I became her healthcare advocate, and I negotiated the healthcare system with her. And so I saw the healthcare system up very personal and close. And I will honestly tell you, it is not a pretty picture. It is just not a good system at all. And so recently, so what happened for me was I had, my mom passed away in May, and then about 2 weeks after that, I got a cold call from a woman named Jackie, who is the state rep in Rye. And she was calling to look for people, along with Alison, to run for state rep from Stratham. So she called me. It was a Friday evening. I answered the phone. She said, "Are you interested in running for state rep?" And I said, "Well, let me think about it." And I didn't hang up the phone on her. I didn't laugh at her. I didn't say, "You're crazy." So I said, let me think about it, and I would love to sit down and talk with you about it and give it some thought. So that was a Friday evening. We got together on Sunday, and she brought Deborah with her, and she brought some other folks with her, and we sat and had a long conversation. And again, I said, let me think about this. And I said, but I'm practicing law. I'm a family law attorney at this point, and that's what I do. And I said, I'd really like to speak to other attorneys who are both currently state reps and also practicing law. So she said, great. She said, we'll hook you up with people. So she did, and I spoke to several people, and they said, this is very doable. And I said, oh, that's because you're in large firms, and you've got all kinds of support people and secretaries and paralegals. And 2 of them said to me, no, I don't depend on that system. 2 different people said, I don't depend on that system. And it's great, and they both encouraged me to do it. So I signed up, and here I am. And I've been canvassing. One of the things that I love doing about campaigning is canvassing. I just really, really enjoy it. And I've been knocking on doors and having really, really good conversations with people. Really, people are very, very receptive, very, very receptive. And I'm only at the door for a short period of time, but I get into fairly intimate conversations with people. And one woman told me about, she has a son, she and her husband have a son who has mental health problems, and they initially lived in Durham so that they could be in the Oyster River school system, because that's a very fine school system, as is our school system. And Oyster River couldn't serve the child's needs. And the husband, they have private insurance, and the husband works for a corporation, and they got so frustrated with the lack of services that the husband was able to transfer to Vermont. So they literally moved to Vermont so that this child could get the services that he needed. And then they came back to Stratham. They moved to Stratham. And at that point, things became difficult again with getting services for their son. And the Department of Children and Families, which is our state agency that deals with children who are neglected and abused, suggested to these 2 parents that they surrender their parental rights so that this child could get Medicaid and get the services he needed. And that's just horrible, that we are putting families in that kind of position. So that's what motivates me. is really hearing, really hearing, really truly hearing what people need. And so there is a joint, the Senate and as I understand it, the Senate and the House have some joint committees, and one of them is healthcare. And I would really, really like to serve on the joint healthcare committee. So that's my journey.
Thank you, Zoe. Now we'll hear from Alexis.
Hello everyone, I'm Alexis Simpson, and I, as Heidi already said, I am currently serving as your state representative. I live in Exeter and I serve Exeter, Newfields, Newmarket, and Stratham. And I am also honored to be running with you two. Thank you for accepting the call.
Thank you for talking us into it.
You're welcome. I'm really looking forward to your passion for service and also your compassion for your neighbors. Yeah, it's touching. So as you all know, the last couple of years have been very difficult to be someone who is trying to do right by public education, by women's rights, by LGBTQ plus rights. It has just been a very hard couple of years to try to get some things done from my perspective. But I will have to say that means I really, really want your vote so that I can go back and try again and perhaps have some more success. So you probably know a little bit about me, although I do lament that I didn't get to see you much face-to-face in the campaign season leading up to 2020. So I also am welcoming your questions as we get later into this forum tonight. But I did want to go ahead and talk about some of the things that I worked on, because those are also the things that I care passionately about and will work on again. So I think the most relevant for all of us in the last few months has been the ensuring that we still have access to abortion care in New Hampshire. We had, as you know, my colleagues / opponents in the State House passed an abortion ban in the budget and at 24 weeks, and I think it's really important that we prevent them from passing any more restrictions on women's rights and freedoms. And I'll be working again on trying to pass the Access to Abortion Care Act, which would basically codify the rights that we had under the Roe decision into our state law. So that did not get passed last year, as you might imagine, and also was a very frustrating experience as a woman, not just for that legislation to be tabled, but to not even be able to talk about why that legislation was important for you all, my constituents, and for myself, and for all of our, I don't actually have daughters, but for all of our daughters, right? And so I think it's really important that I continue to keep up that work in the State House. And then the other piece that I am sure that I'll continue to work on is related to school nutrition. So specifically, I was working on increasing our ability to have farm-to-school, the farm-to-school program in all of our schools across the state, so opening opportunities to schools that are able to embrace that as much as some of our schools are. And I've worked closely with Jean Pierce over at the high school, who does the food service for the SAU 16, and she has been a great partner in that work, and so I'm glad to be working with her again. And we will try to move through some more school nutrition legislation in the coming term. Yeah, I won't get into some of the arguments that we're facing with that, but it's really important to me in a state as wealthy as we are, that all of our children be as well nourished as they possibly could be. And I'm incredibly frustrated that that is not a universal value of our policymakers. So I'll continue to work on that, and hopefully with more success. And there are a couple other things that I was working on. I think the one that I want to talk most about is, it arose out of the pandemic. And that was that during the pandemic, we saw how important it was, and how people in our communities just really wanted to participate in democracy. And I think along with the threats that we're seeing to our basic rights and freedoms, we're also seeing this threat to democracy, right? And it's just incredible the way remote access to meetings has allowed so many more people to be involved in our democratic process. And I would really like to see that continued, as would a lot of people. So I welcomed the opportunity last year to work with the New Hampshire Municipal Association and with members of municipal bodies in order to put forward legislation that would change the law enough so that we could continue to do that remote meeting in a way that was legal and accessible. And so I hope that I will at least be working in some measure on that this fall, but I'm not sure how that will look. I hope it will be bipartisan. There's a lot of support from Republicans and Democrats across the state, especially at the local level, because we've seen how practical and necessary it is for our young families, for our older folks who don't want to drive in the winter, for our people with disabilities having access to the same level of participation in democracy. And so I really see that as part of the work for strengthening our democracy, which I think is really important in this moment. So I think that's all for me for my opening statement, but I welcome your questions, and I hope for your vote again in November.
All right. This was great. Thank you all. And can I just say, like, this is no small task for people in our community to stand up and say, yeah, okay, I'll represent all of us. So I hope, can we just give them like a huge round of applause and thank them? Because it also costs a lot of money to like pay for all those signs that you see and to run ads and to, you know, have something run in the newspaper and to print off all of your mailings, all of that stuff. Yeah, pay for gas to go from house to house in Stratham. So, yeah, just a thought. While your questions are brewing, I have a quick question. And maybe I'll direct it to you first, Alexis, because you brought up the abortion ban that was in the budget. Do you all understand what that means? That they didn't even have a public discourse around putting this horrible restriction on a woman's right to decide how and when and if she wants to have children. And they didn't talk about it in committees. They didn't vote in the House. They didn't vote in the Senate. They put it into a budget bill, and Sununu signed the budget, so it became law because it was part of the budget bill. So it was really awful. Just the process that they went by was really awful. But what I wanted to talk about was, Alexis, when you might hear people in the community say, well, a 24-week ban, maybe that's not so bad. Like, that's, by 24 weeks you should know whether or not you're going to carry a child. So why is that so bad? So I wonder if you would maybe speak to that issue, because I think, certainly as a woman, I understand intimately, having had children of my own, why a 24-week ban is horrible. I mean, but I'll let you speak to that if you would, please.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so you've already mentioned that it was in the budget. I think there was a clear political sense on those that wanted it passed, that it wouldn't pass on its own. And so a way to get it passed would be to put it in the budget. And I think this was one of those frustrating times where I wanted more representation. I wanted more people in the room that knew what it meant to deal with a difficult pregnancy after 24 weeks. And what it means to have to make difficult medical decisions when you are when so much is at stake. And I think I spoke on the floor against this piece in the budget, and what I tried to help my colleagues understand was that people who need to end a pregnancy after 24 weeks are people who have wanted to be pregnant for a long time, and they are making one of the most difficult decisions they will ever have to make in their lives, and that medical decisions as well as emotional decisions, right? And that there is, I believe, under no circumstances should legislators be in the room when women are making decisions with their doctors, like period, full stop. But even if you don't believe that, in order to make a decision about legislation like this, you need to understand what it is really about when you're talking about termination after 24 weeks. It is not, these are not cavalier decisions that people are making. These come about because of medical struggles and complications that are beyond our imagination unless we've walked through these situations with women, often in a hospital. And I think it was, it all fell on deaf ears, even as I tried to share some stories of women who had gone through these decisions. And finally, there was a woman who became pregnant after the ban, and was pregnant as the ban went into effect. And you probably heard someone speaking of her, Lisa Akey, I believe is her name. She was pregnant with twins and was likely going to have to make a difficult decision about keeping one of the twins alive and maybe not the other. And I'm not Dr. Sherman, so I'm not going to get into the. I'm a minister by training, so I deal more with the sort of spiritual, social, emotional aspects of these decisions. But she was able to communicate to enough legislators that they needed to at least change the policy so that it would allow for someone to terminate a pregnancy if there were a fatal fetal diagnosis involved. But it took a year for proponents of this ban to even understand that this could be the most crucial decision and most difficult decision a woman ever makes after 24 weeks, and still want to be making that decision in the room with the woman after 24 weeks. So it is hard to talk about with people when they say, and I think it's just really important that we keep saying that you cannot understand what it is to be pregnant after 24 weeks. Every single pregnancy is different, right? And that pregnant people need to be allowed to make these decisions themselves after 24 weeks. I think the struggle is that for political and media purposes, this has been mischaracterized as people making irresponsible and cavalier decisions when they have been pregnant for a long time. And that is just not what it is. And I think the less we try to talk about from that angle, and the more we try to say women really need to be able to make their own decisions at every stage of their pregnancy, because every pregnancy is different, the better off we will be in trying to get people to understand that this is a fundamental right to be the primary decision maker in your own your own body, right, and your own medical situation. So I don't know if that answers your question succinctly, but that's how it is.
Right.
Yeah.
No, thank you, Alexis. Any other questions?
Yes.
I don't understand how the abortion bill got incorporated into the budget.
Yeah.
It was sneaky, wasn't it?
Yes. I mean, yes. There are two parts of the budget. There's the numbers part, and then there's the policy part. And so a budget is a policy statement. It is a moral document, right? But tagging on this kind of controversial policy to it is it happens, but it was surprising and underhanded for something this controversial to get placed in the budget in that way, especially when it was clear that if the people had decided, that is not what they would have wanted. And I have to say, this is a budget year. The first year is always the budget year, so we'll come up on another budget, and so part of our jobs will be to fight against anything like this happening again. For sure, because there was plenty of other legislation that did not get through, thank God, but by the skin of our teeth, right? And a lot of the folks who voted with us on the other side of the aisle are either not running again or being primaried. So we have a very narrow margin, and we need to make sure that the even stricter abortion legislation that's been put out there is not snuck into the budget again.
I might add that Planned Parenthood of Northern New England put out a scoreboard of how our representatives voted on 9 bills that were relevant to abortion. And Alexis and Deborah were 9 for 9 on the good side, yay. And he whose name shall not be raised was 1 for 9. And I think that this needs to be high on your list of priorities when you talk to everybody that Abrami cannot be trusted when it comes to health care and abortion and anything except cutting taxes for his rich friends.
When I knock on doors, many men are raising with me choice. This is not just a women's issue. And I think that needs to be emphasized strongly. This involves families, and men are very aware of this issue and are speaking on it strongly.
Do you knock on, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, follow.
That's a very good
follow up, Rick.
Do you knock only on Democratic doors?
I'm knocking on Dems, and I'm knocking on undeclareds who have voted Democratic in off-year elections. And so it's a mix of people, and every once in a while I get someone who is maybe mistakenly on the list, but the other side happens too. I come across people who are not on the list and are very supportive. And I have good conversations also with Republicans who are, again, many people are speaking about the chaos in government, and they're thinking of the federal level, but they're aware of it and are very much open, very open, I would say, and want civility back in government and want the two sides working together, and raise that with me a lot.
I think we had a question right here.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to repeat the appreciation that I have for, 4 women running at this point, because I think it's super appropriate, given what we've just been talking about. As a dad of 2 daughters, for example, I want their decisions to be theirs. And, but Alexis, you said something about how if that had been a separate bill, it obviously would have failed. And to me, it seems like not just this past session, but especially the session before, the people's way wasn't enabled because of the 70 some odd governor vetoes. And I'm just kind of curious as to how you think there can be a way to, in the event that there isn't a Democratic majority again, or even if there is, and there's still if Dr. Sherman doesn't succeed, I sure think he will, but if he doesn't, how do we reverse this, what I consider across the board non-representative government in the state of New Hampshire? But all of the polling says that the majority want red flag laws, all want full background checks, all want reproductive rights to be, women's decision.
Right.
So, it's like subject after topic after topic after topic was swung the way of the minority, especially the session before the last. So I don't know, is there a mechanism that can be worked on that could prevent that again? I know you need a supermajority.
That is a
override
great
veto.
question, and you all may have more sort of creative ideas about this than I do.
When there was a bipartisan vote, with obviously more than the supermajority voting in favor, and then you just couldn't override veto. What was happening in that? Why were those that had joined the majority party then backing away? What was the benefit? How did we prevent them from benefiting from that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Gosh. I mean, what I keep thinking is like, vote.
Yeah.
Like, we just have to increase voter voter turnout
Yeah.
and everywhere, across the state, so that the representatives who are elected are the ones who the people want to elect. And then I think right now, there's just a lot of pressure in the Republican Party for Republicans to line up with each other. And sometimes that is against their constituents' best interest. I mean, the number of Republicans who sort of didn't line up with the radical right or the far right are being primaried, right? I mean, folks that I worked on things with, and who I really, really wish would come back to the legislature, and so I'm not sure from our side of the aisle how much of that we can fix, except to keep putting pressure on them and keep speaking out. Do you have any more creative answers?
I mean, I think voting is like the creative answer, because it's showing that these people that now are primarying, or these people that are really far right, are not the future of the Republican Party. And I think hopefully that will happen at a federal level, and that message will come across. But that's my hope, giant hope.
Yeah, well, look at Liz Cheney.
I know, but you look at some of
Yeah.
these like Senate
Yeah.
candidates that are really far right that aren't doing very well. So sort of my
Yeah.
hope is these really far right people realize, hey, they may get through a primary, but that doesn't make them very electable. So follow up.
I don't know if it's an elephant in the room or not, but I'm sort of tuned into Free Staters. And I want to know how to identify them, because if they run as Republican or Democrat, they're a wolf in sheep's clothing. And I think it's my understanding that all of the strong positions in the Senate are held by Free Staters. The chairman of or whatever you call them. This is my civics lesson, sorry.
So, I'm less familiar with the Senate. I think if we have a question on the Senate, hold that for a minute, and maybe you've been brushing up on this. Sam is back there, who is the campaign manager for Deborah Altschulin, for the Senate campaign. So, hold that for a second. Certainly, one of the problems we have is that the majority leader for the Republican Party in the House is a Free Stater. That is a huge problem, and that is the source of much anguish for some Republicans and for all Democrats.
And he's a Republican?
Yes. So it is a lot harder, I think. Free Staters mostly sign up as Republicans. So it is harder, like if you're voting for a Republican, it is harder to tell.
Are there buzzwords that they use that give them away? I mean, no public education, but.
Right.
Yeah, we get rid of taxes, more guns, it's the same.
I think in
Identifying
general, it's fairly well known who they are.
Yeah,
There are groups
yeah.
in the state that have identified who they are. There are entire websites designed to saying these are the Free Staters, these are the positions they hold, even down to the local levels. They're on school boards, which we've all heard about. They're on these municipal committees that are shutting down ski resorts that were running perfectly fine until they got involved, right? Like all of we know who they are. They've been unmasked, and they quite frankly don't really even try to hide it anymore, right? They're sort of,
Well,
you know, they're proud of
Well,
it.
some of them do hide it, but it's partly because it's a spectrum, right? So you're like Free Staters,
True, that's true.
Libertarians, like traditional Republicans. And so it's harder for the folks who are like libertarians, but maybe don't identify as Free Staters. So I think that's we just have to keep asking the questions like, how do you support public education? You sort of have to dig in deep, like, how do you feel about vouchers? Like, how do you feel about
Marijuana?
anything?
Are they pro-marijuana?
They've been pro-medical marijuana for sure. I think if you said generally, they're probably pro, but I don't know that for sure. So, across the board. But yeah, I think people know in their local areas, like we can tell you there's no Free Staters on our ballot, right?
Correct.
Well, we don't know who's gonna get through the Republican primary for my seat. So and they're both have very quiet history online and all of that. So I can't really, until I hear from them in a full public forum, I won't really know much about there. But generally, like, the word is getting out and people are making sure that the word
Like,
gets out.
Sununu just said something in the last week about, he labeled someone
Mhm.
a Free Stater,
Mm-hmm.
which kind
But,
of opens it up.
Yeah.
But I don't know that you need to be a free stater to be antithetical to democracy and the will of the people. And for example, Pat Abrami sponsored legislation to have the 2020 presidential election audited in Windham, Merrimack County, and all of New Hampshire. And we know Joyce for 25 years, and we know Debbie, who's our current town clerk, and it's impugning the integrity of our local officials. And this is Pat Abrami, who's not particularly identified, I don't believe, as a Free Stater, and yet he's attacking our democracy and the will of the people to vote. So he's been in office for 12 years, he's seeking year 12 and 13, and it's enough, or 13 and 14, it's enough,
Yes, it is. I think I saw another hand up earlier. Did your question get out?
There was just a question over here about what's a Free Stater. I didn't know if somebody could
So
explain.
it was me. I never heard it used. I mean, I know what you're talking about now, listening,
Yes.
but I never heard the phrase used.
Yeah. In general, it's a group of people that were sort of loosely connected all across the nation years ago, like 20 years ago, and they talked about all of them moving together to one state and setting up this sort of nirvana, what for them would be this libertarian nirvana, and they
Unfortunately,
they chose New Hampshire. They chose New Hampshire, and so a lot of them are here.
Their goal was
Yes.
just 20,000
I just say dig a hole in Texas and drown it.
or Florida.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah,
I'm
no,
so passionate that way.
yep. I think we all are.
Against.
Yeah. Right. Any question? Oh, I have a question.
Alison, I have a question for you. We've been in this town for about 30 years, and I actually can't remember a member of our select board ever then running for state rep.
Oh.
Maybe it's happened?
Tim Copeland did it.
Oh, okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
And-
But what I wanted to ask you is when we all went to civics, local government 101 with our town moderator and learned about our different forms of government, we learned that the select board is our executive branch.
Yes.
I was just wondering, in your experience on the select board, what have you learned that you would then take to the legislature? How would it inform that viewpoint? Because after that, you just have to become a judge.
I didn't really think of it that way. It's like what do you call that when you get the Tony and the Emmy and the
Oh, that, yeah. The EGOT.
So you got it. I get
The
that.
EGOT of New Hampshire.
Well, it's hard to answer this way on the heels of discussing Free Staters, but I mean, I think one of the things I really loved about the select board is that when I joined it for several years, I had no idea what the politics of the other two members were, and so it's a little like at that local level, you work across the aisle and we all govern from sort of the same perspective, which is to get information from experts, from our planning boards and commissions, from our, from any outside firms that we hire, from staff, from residents, and make a decision that's in the best interest of the town. And we all govern, and Joe has now joined the select board, and I think he so far seems to align with that philosophy. So, it's made it easy for us to come to accord. I don't know how he's going to turn out, but so far he's good. And I really liked that. I've liked the fact that I finally learned on election night when one of the other select boards was getting his news from Fox News. Okay, maybe we're not I was looking at Nate Silver's tweets and he was on Fox News. So different sides of the aisle, but we've worked really well together, and I really value that because on you know, even for all the discussion about all the ways in which we're so different, I think you would probably speak to this, having been a legislator. There's so many places that don't get any press where both sides can work together. And so, you know, I hope that can be true in the State House. It's not going to be true for everything, obviously, but I do like finding common ground, and I've liked that experience. I think it's a valuable place to start. And the other thing I said to my husband when Trump was elected and then people started throwing out names to run against him, like Oprah and The Rock, I was like, you know, being a politician is really about sitting in really long, boring meetings where, like, you're just like, when are these people going to stop talking? Like, when is this going to end? And, you know, and so I was like, you can't be a famous person to do that. That's not what famous people do. Like, you have to be grounded in the ability to listen to people talk for long periods of time and read all the documents you're supposed to read. And I've been doing that for years. And I think it's valuable to know that you're capable of doing that, because I'm not sure everyone is. You know, it's sometimes not that fun, but mostly is.
All right. Oh, we have another question here.
So when you all are elected into the State House of Reps, what are your first, unanimously of course, what are your first 3 legislative priorities? I just go down the line. It's a question for all of you.
We'll let it start up the other end of the line.
Okay, but I hope I haven't been talking too much. So there's an early filing period for incumbents, and so I have refiled the Access to Abortion Care Act, which would allow the right of a woman to have access to abortion care up until the ban, and that would be codified into statute, into state law. So, and I'll send a press release tomorrow, but I have already put that legislation in, and I am not hiding it from the opposition. And the team that is prepared to fight for that is big, and they are energized and they are excited, and they involve legislators and grassroots, and you all. Like, it is of high importance to people. So that's the first. And then, surprisingly, a little bit messier, is trying to figure out how to devise a farm-to-school reimbursement policy bill, which would allow every school in the state to have a little bit of money to spend on local food for their students. And it's a little bit complicated. Other states have done it. New York does it, Vermont, Maine. I mean, a bunch of other states are doing it, and so there are a bunch of ways to make it happen, and we're trying to adapt it to New Hampshire. We did it last year. We learned some issues that we can work out this time, and we're in the process now of talking through all the stakeholders and including the Commissioner of Agriculture and folks at the Department of Education, and just trying to come up with something that everybody can do on a New Hampshire budget, which is a shoestring and involves very little staff and very little upgraded technology and very little will among the legislature to dedicate money to such a thing. So I will continue to pursue that, because I think it's really crucial for our farmers, our agriculture infrastructure, our resilience in terms of our food security, as well as the health and nutrition and education of our students. So I'll keep doing that and see where it goes. And there are some other avenues right now that the community, the farm to school community and the hunger community are looking towards to try to get more money from the federal government to use for farm to school that wouldn't have to go through the legislature. So that's also in the works as well. And you asked for a third. I think that third is focusing some time on the budget. Yeah, because it's we lost a really strong person in the House who was on the Budget Committee, and Representative Kathy Rogers this year, and her absence will feel missed greatly. And I think, as we learned last budget, we need a lot of people paying attention, not just folks who are traditionally on the Finance Committee. So I'll probably be more attuned to that than I ever have been.
Could I just ask a question before I answer I just wanted to know what committees you serve on, because I actually don't know.
Yeah, sure. So generally people just serve on one committee, depending on how much time it takes. But I serve on the Judiciary Committee now. The last time I served, I was on the Environment and Agriculture Committee. And then I subbed a lot in the Special Committee on Redistricting.
So for me, as I said, healthcare is really a critical issue for me. And I think one of the skills that I would bring to being a representative is listening. And my experience is both as an attorney and in speaking to people as I'm canvassing, that I have an ability to listen and to really hear what people are saying. And so I think for healthcare and being on, or potentially being on the Senate and the House Joint Committee on Healthcare, I think there is an area where I would really, really be interested in listening for what experts are saying, what constituents are saying, what people with knowledge are saying about healthcare and how we can improve the system. And then the other thing that is extremely important to me is working to make mental health care on parity with physical health care, and to ensure that insurance covers mental health care to the same extent that it covers physical health care. And I think and that would include substance abuse treatment also. And to me, that's a very, very important issue. And then another, I am strongly, strongly pro-choice, and so working with Alexis on those issues would also be very important to me. And then finally, domestic violence is an issue that is particularly important to me. In my marriage, I was abused, and it was very difficult to deal with, and I relate very strongly to what generally women are experiencing in that situation. It's very difficult to get out, it's difficult to tell the truth, it's difficult to be believed by people around you, it's difficult to leave when you have a child, and so those constellation of issues are very, very important to me, too.
And I would agree I would like to work on the legislation around protecting abortion rights and healthcare and reproductive choices for women. It's my understanding that the state legislature recently passed legislation making it so that our local officials don't have to enforce federal gun control laws. Yes. Which means that you can go to back to school night with a weapon, and you can go to your child's play with a weapon, and this feels like the wrong direction on the heels of what happened this summer and what has happened for years in this state. So that is something that's really important to me to work on, is gun control, and especially as it is affecting our young people. I didn't mention, but I am the executive director of the Great Bay Stewards, which is the friend group to the Great Bay National Estuary and Research Reserve. So shout out to this lovely lady's t-shirt. So working on environmental, and having been on the Conservation Commission, working on environmental and agricultural issues is really important to me. I feel like I've got a great relationship with a lot of people in this town that are farmers, and I know small farmers face a lot of challenges. So to Zoe's comment about listening, I would like to be a legislator that is listening to the needs of the constituents of Stratham and responding to them and supporting things that they would like to see move forward. So, thank you.
Can you speak to Deborah's?
Oh, did you want to speak to any of our legislative priorities, Sam?
Sure,
Yeah.
I can do that.
Yeah.
Should I pull the chair from here really quick, just for a second?
Yeah.
I think her first and probably biggest thing is reproductive healthcare rights. Like many of the folks up here said, I think that's one of the things that compelled her most to run for state senate. She tells me this story all the time, but she marched on Washington when she was 19 for Roe v. Wade for that, and now I'm the age she was when she did that, and we're seeing fewer rights for women now than she had however many years ago, and that's horrifying. I think that's a huge one. Gun violence prevention. Deborah doesn't want to take away anybody's guns, but New Hampshire has some of the loosest laws in the entire nation when it comes to gun control. New Hampshire just passed through a law, I believe in this past legislative session, which allows adults to walk into schools with guns and not be turned away, which is terrifying. And it makes no sense. Why would anybody need a gun in a school? You don't, right? Especially somebody who's not affiliated with that school. So that's another huge priority for Deborah, and something she's worked on a lot in her life. She's been working with an organization called Haven for the past 10 years, which works with victims of domestic violence and sexual violence, and guns play a role in that a lot. The third, I think, biggest priority for Deborah is education. I don't know how many of you know about the Education Vouchers Program, which was just passed through the New Hampshire legislature, but essentially the state is now paying students or allowing students to get paid to go to private school, covering part of their tuition, and then directly removing that money from the budget for the public school in the local district, which, I mean, by itself isn't great, right? Because it's taking away money from public schools, many of which have fixed costs, so it makes it more expensive for everybody. But beyond that, it's one step in, and this is another point to the Free Staters, one step in the movement that Free Staters are pushing through in New Hampshire to eliminate public school entirely, to defund public schools, which is an insane thing to do. I think those are probably the three biggest things that compelled Deborah to run.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sam. I wanted to say Deborah Altschuler was actually scheduled to be here with us tonight. She is at home with, I'm sorry, this is, she's at home with COVID. She's doing okay. So our current state representative, who worked tirelessly to protect the entire community, she provided information to all of us for the last 2 years. She did eventually succumb to an infection herself. She is doing okay though. And so we are really grateful that her campaign manager, Sam, was here tonight to provide some talking points about what's important to Deborah. So we appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, Dolores.
So donations, where would I give the money?
Whip it out.
Just give them some money?
You can.
Oh, our
Well, I'm
website?
gonna
Yeah.
give
But
cash.
there is,
Oh,
okay.
cash, give it directly to the candidates and they will,
But I want, well, I'm only gonna give $50, but is there a pot it goes in? I mean,
Why don't you take it through the
sure,
Stratham Dems
if you
and then
give it to the Stratham Dems, we will
Yeah.
provide it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll make sure it gets to them.
Thank you very much.
I've been told to donate to Act Blue.
So that's an
Oh, I do
online
that too,
portal,
but
yeah,
this is local,
so
so-
all the candidates have an Act Blue account, and it's one of those, it's something to make it more convenient for people to
Well,
just
so
make
do,
donations.
will they see any of Act Blue money?
Oh, yes.
You have to, I think you have to
Each
pick
our
a
own-
specific candidate, and so
Right.
like, if you go to my website, alison4nh.org, you can hit the donate button and it'll just take you to Act Blue, and same.
Well, it's like,
Yeah, thank you for, yeah,
Thank you.
donations, that's great. Oh, another question.
One thing for the folks that have attended tonight, we just posted postcards. Christie, we just put the first batch of Stratham Dems sponsored postcards in the mail. So if you're a registered Democrat in town, you should be receiving one in the next couple of days. And it has the web addresses for Alison and Zoe on it. And because they're running in the primary, and also want to encourage everybody to come out for the primary a few Tuesdays from now. Oh my gosh.
It's on Tuesday.
Oh my gosh, it's that close.
It's next Tuesday.
Oh, that's right, it is already September.
And I think
Oh.
I think we have a sign-up list here, right? So before you leave, if you could leave your email address, we do have some candidates that will need to be, there'll be a write-in candidate on your ballot, and we'll send you that information over email so that you can help us make sure that those write-in candidates are able to make it to the general election ballot in November. So share your email if you're not already on our list. If you are, you will know it because you get emails from Jan. She's our vice chair of the board. So maybe we have some closing thoughts from each of the candidates, and then we'll just kind of go casual from there.
Hi,
yeah.
I just wanted to ask if you'd make an announcement about Stratham Dems tomorrow evening.
Oh yeah, we meet typically the first Thursday of every month at here. Well, we've been meeting here since we've kind of all started to gather again. We had been meeting on Zoom for a while, but 6:30 we have kind of a social half hour, and then at 7 o'clock we start our monthly meeting. So if you want to, be one of the people who's helping us in the run up to the election in November, come to those meetings. We're doing a lot of organizing and a lot of brainstorming and talking about how to spend the money that we're raising. So yeah, everyone's welcome to come to that on Thursday nights. First Thursday of every month, 7 o'clock right here. Come 6:30 if you want some good yummy snacks. Like we always put out a good spread. So again, some closing remarks. Maybe Zoe, we'll start with you this time since you're in the middle there.
Sure. So I just want to say that I feel the energy in this room. It's wonderful to see both old friends and new faces, and to have the honor, because it truly is an honor to be running, and talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors. We're all available. If anyone wants to host a house party or some other form of event, we'll all make ourselves available, and I look forward to speaking to many, many Stratham residents, and it's wonderful to meet new people as well as old friends.
I'll just thank the Stratham Dems again for putting this on, and thank you all for coming out tonight. It was great to have these conversations and to hear more from my fellow candidates. And if there's any more questions you have for me, feel free to shoot me an email, visit my website, and I look forward to seeing you all again in the future.
I think I would just be redundant.
Yes.
So I think my closing statement is just thank you for coming, and we look forward to seeing you.
And there are lots of cookies.
Yes.
So will you consider coming tomorrow night to Stratham Dems?
I'd love to.
Social half hour is at 6:30, and then the meeting is at 7. But you can do it by Zoom. So if you can't visit me,